The morning sun rose over Ouagadougou, yet the sky did not sing with birds. It trembled. It thundered. It split open with the roar of engines. One by one, mighty planes descended, their iron wings flashing like swords in the light. But they did not come bearing oil. They did not come bearing gold. No. They came for something greater, something unseen before in the chronicles of history. They came for a man named Ibrahim Traoré. 42 nations, led by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, set their boots upon the red soil of Burkina Faso. Not for conquest, not for plunder, but for a cause that shook the earth. And so we must ask, my brothers and sisters, why has a small nation, long forgotten by the powers of the world, become the fire that lights the horizon? Why does a leader not yet 40 years of age stand at the center of global storm and prophecy? This is not merely the story of one land. This is the story of Africa rising. Stay with me and let us walk this road together. And if you believe this moment matters, hit subscribe. For this journey is our journey too. The people of Ouagadougou had seen soldiers before. They had seen convoys of battered trucks rolling through dusty streets, carrying weary men in faded uniforms. They had seen foreign forces arrive with promises on their lips and conditions in their hands. But they had never seen this. From the east, from the west, from the skies above, the ground shook as if creation itself was trembling. Great steel birds from Riyadh, from Islamabad, from Cairo, from Abuja, descended one after another upon the cracked runway of the capital. Their wings shadowed the sun. Their engines split the silence of the Sahel. And when their doors opened, the world changed. They came in waves. Soldiers bearing the crescent of Saudi Arabia, the eagle of Egypt, the star of Pakistan, the green-white banner of Nigeria. Armor glistened. Boots struck the ground like thunder. And yet, as the crowds pressed against fences and rooftops, they saw something they had never seen before. 42 nations marching as one, not under the flag of a conqueror, not beneath the banner of empire, but gathered beneath a new symbol. For in the center of it all, high upon the mast, was not the flag of Riyadh. It was not the crescent, nor the eagle, nor the star. It was the red, the green, the gold of Burkina Faso. Yes, my brothers and sisters. 42 nations stood in formation, and every eye looked not to the west, not to the east, but to a single flag fluttering against the African wind. For the first time in living memory, the soil of the Sahel was not merely a battleground. It was the pulpit of history. Reporters from across the globe rushed forward, their cameras flashing like lightning in a summer storm. They shouted questions, desperate, incredulous. What is happening here? Why has the Sahel, long dismissed as the periphery, become the beating heart of the world's attention? And in every whispered conversation, in every fearful glance, the name of one man lingered. Ibrahim Traoré. Not a king, not a general of empires, but a son of Burkina, a leader barely 40, whose voice had pierced through the noise of colonial promises and neo-colonial chains. Let us pause here. Let us feel the weight of that image. Children of Ouagadougou waving flags, their small hands lifted in awe. Mothers clutching their infants, whispering prayers into the dust-filled wind. Fathers, long weary of broken pledges, standing tall as soldiers from 42 nations saluted not Riyadh, not Paris, not Washington, but Burkina Faso. It was a moment both fragile and mighty. Fragile because alliances built on shifting sands can crumble. Mighty because never before had Africa been given such a stage. This was no accident. This was no coincidence. It was a declaration, silent yet deafening. Burkina Faso is not a pawn to be moved on another man's chessboard. Burkina Faso is a player seated at the table of nations. And so, while the roar of engines faded and the dust began to settle upon the streets of Ouagadougou, the world watched. Some with hope, some with fear, all with trembling hearts. But my brothers and sisters, hear me now. Behind the parades, behind the shimmering armor and the waving banners, shadows were already gathering. For whenever 42 nations converge upon the land of one, questions are born. Questions that echo in the hearts of the people and in the halls of power. Is this the dawn of freedom? Or is it the disguise of a new chain? And so we must ask, was this grand arrival truly a shield for Burkina Faso, or the opening move in a deeper game of control? The answer would soon be revealed, not in ceremony, but in the reactions of the mighty nations watching from afar. The landing in Ouagadougou was not an isolated spectacle. It was a tremor that shook the palaces of Europe, the war rooms of America, and the command posts of rival powers across the globe. The dust of the Sahel had not even settled, yet whispers had already become roars in Paris, Washington, Brussels, Moscow, and Beijing. In Paris, the Élysée Palace convened in haste. For generations, France had considered the Sahel its dominion, its pré carré, its backyard of influence. But now, the sight of Saudi planes on Burkina's soil sent shivers through corridors lined with portraits of past presidents. One advisor whispered, almost in despair, "We have lost Ouagadougou. If we lose Ouagadougou, we lose the Sahel." The French press carried headlines that read like obituaries. Is this the end of France in Africa? Across the Atlantic in Washington, the Pentagon's screens glowed with satellite images of the Saudi-led deployment. Generals with brows furrowed and fists clenched muttered among themselves, "This looks like a NATO, but one we do not control." The term was repeated in hushed tones, a shadow NATO, and in those words was an admission. America had been outmaneuvered not by Russia, not by China, but by an Arab coalition daring to step onto African soil. In Brussels, the European Union's chambers trembled with unease. Diplomats spoke in riddles, but their fear was plain. If Burkina Faso, poor and embattled, could draw 42 nations to its side, what would stop Mali, Niger, or Chad from following? The dominoes of French and European influence were lined up, and one by one they threatened to fall. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the reaction was a mix of curiosity and calculation. Russian strategists, weary from the fires of Ukraine, saw in Burkina a fresh theater, a chance to challenge the West on African soil. Already, whispers spread of advisors, of ex-Wagner men reborn as official trainers, ready to embed in Ouagadougou. For Russia, this was not charity. It was chess. And in Beijing, the reaction was cold, deliberate, precise. China spoke softly, as it always does, promising roads, bridges, and dams. "We are not here for politics," they said, "only for progress." But Traoré and his circle knew. Every bridge carries a toll, every dam holds a debt. The stage was set. The world was no longer watching Burkina Faso as a victim, but as a centerpiece. The Sahel had become a mirror reflecting the fears and ambitions of every great power, and at the center of it all stood Ibrahim Traoré, not cloaked in armor, not shielded by walls of stone, but standing firm with words as his weapon. When asked about the Western sanctions, about the threats, about the warnings of collapse, he spoke slowly, with the voice of a preacher to his people. When Paris ordered, we cut the cord. When Washington threatened, we stood in silence. When Europe sanctioned, we turned to friends who asked for no chains. Burkina will not bow. We are not a pawn. We are players. The square erupted. His people cheered his name, their chants echoing like the drums of old. And for a moment it seemed as though the dust itself carried his defiance across the world. But listen closely, my brothers and sisters. For every cheer in the square, there was a murmur in the shadows. For every banner that waved in the sun, there was a dagger being sharpened in the dark. The world was watching. The West, the East, the powers of old and the powers rising, all had fixed their gaze upon Ouagadougou. But the real battle was not only out there. It was beginning to stir within. And as the chants of support filled the air, strange cracks began to appear inside the very walls of Burkina's defense. For if the world's giants could not break Traoré from without, could they perhaps break him from within? The banners still waved in Ouagadougou. The chants of the people still echoed in the squares. But beneath the roar of celebration, a quieter sound began to stir. The whisper of betrayal. At first, it was dismissed as rumor. A weapons depot north of the capital suddenly erupted in flame. The government declared it an accident, a mishap of storage. But when investigators sifted through the ashes, they found fragments. Fragments that could only have come from military-grade explosives, moved by hands that knew their way through armories. Soon after, a convoy bearing Saudi equipment, reconnaissance drones, jamming devices, supplies meant to strengthen the IMCTC deployment, vanished on its journey. The headlines screamed, "Rebels strike supply line." But whispers in the cafes of Ouagadougou told another story. It was not rebels. It was not insurgents. It was insiders. Men in uniform. Men with divided loyalties. And then the disappearances began. Colonels requesting leave and never returning. Captains slipping across borders without farewell. Names long tied to training academies in Paris suddenly reappearing on lists of suspects. Yes, my brothers and sisters, the enemy without was terrible, but the enemy within was deadly. For what blade cuts deeper than the one hidden inside your own household? Traoré's circle received report after report. Some officers leaning toward Riyadh, others whispering with Moscow, others still reaching out to the embassies of the West. It was as if the veins of the army itself had become rivers flowing in opposite directions, threatening to tear the body apart. Meanwhile, on the streets, a different fire burned. The youth of Burkina, weary of promises made by outsiders, rose with banners in their hands. No Saudis, no NATO, no Russia, no China. Burkina for the Burkinabe. Their chants thundered down the boulevards, their voices streamed across phones and screens, carrying hashtags that flew faster than planes. A 19-year-old girl standing upon a broken wall cried into a camera, "We are not dying to be pawns. We are fighting to live as people." Her words became a slogan, painted on walls, printed on banners, etched into the very heart of a generation. But protest can be a double-edged sword. For as youth demanded sovereignty, rival factions used their cries to sow division. One march bore Saudi flags, another bore Russian banners, and still another rejected all foreign signs. The city became a chorus of competing chants, harmony threatened by dissonance. And in the midnight hours, in the smoke-filled rooms of barracks and ministries, whispers grew sharper. The words coup began to drift upon the air. Foreign intelligence reported secret meetings, funds flowing mysteriously into the accounts of certain generals, promises exchanged, weapons for loyalty, power for betrayal. Yes, the streets of Ouagadougou still glowed with the fire of hope, but in its veins shadows crept. One evening, as Traoré stood upon the balcony of the presidential palace, he looked down upon a sea of youth. They lifted their fists. They cried his name. And he clenched his hand, whispering not to them but to himself, "If they believe in me, I cannot yield." Yet even as his oath burned in the night, in the barracks beyond the square, other oaths were being sworn. Not of loyalty, but of betrayal. Not of freedom, but of ambition. The question was no longer whether Burkina Faso could withstand the pressure of the outside world. The true question was this: could Burkina withstand the daggers hidden within its own heart? And if those daggers struck, would the nation bleed out before it ever had the chance to rise? While Ouagadougou's streets burned with chants, the world's capitals burned with anxiety. The map of Africa was no longer drawn in quiet ink, it was being rewritten in fire. In Washington, the Pentagon convened in its windowless chambers. Screens glowed with satellite images. Convoys of Saudi armor, gatherings of young protesters, whispers of Russian advisors on the ground. One general, his voice grave, muttered, "If Riyadh is building a NATO of its own, then the United States is no longer the architect of order." The words fell heavy, for they admitted what America feared most: the loss of monopoly, the loss of control. Across the Atlantic in Paris, tension turned to despair. The French press screamed, "Is this the end of French Africa?" In the Élysée, old generals shook their heads. If Burkina can break the chain, Mali will follow. Niger will follow. Chad will follow. 60 years of empire erased in a handful of years. Meanwhile, Moscow smiled. In the Kremlin, advisors pointed to the Sahel as proof that the West was weakening. They whispered to Traoré's men, "Stand firm with Russia and NATO will never touch you." Yet others in Burkina saw the price hidden beneath those words. Moscow wanted a foothold, not a partnership. And in Beijing, the tone was calm, calculated like the turning of an abacus. "We do not bring armies," they said. "We bring bridges, we bring roads, we bring airports." But behind every promise of concrete lay contracts of debt, a chain not of iron but of paper. The United Nations became a theater of accusation. The Americans claimed Riyadh and Moscow were fueling instability. The Saudis replied, "We were invited." The West abandoned the Sahel. The Russians thundered, "Every nation has the right to choose its allies." The Chinese, as always, spoke softly, "We only invest, we do not interfere." But beneath the diplomacy, every delegate knew the Sahel had become the furnace of a new order. And yet amidst all these voices, the question lingered. Could Burkina Faso survive the weight of giants pressing in from every side? Could a nation so small, so fragile, truly stand in the middle of storms that shook continents? The world held its breath. And in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré stood before his people, ready to speak not only to Burkina, not only to Africa, but to history itself. What path would he choose? And what price would that choice demand? The night was heavy in Ouagadougou. Engines still growled on the runways. Foreign advisors still whispered in corridors. And yet in the squares the people gathered once more. This time it was not soldiers who filled the streets. It was the youth. Tens of thousands carrying banners scrawled with a single cry, "No Saudis, no NATO, no Russia, no China, Burkina for the Burkinabe." Their voices rose like a storm. Some called it defiance. Others called it naivete. But in those voices you could hear something the world had forgotten. The sound of a people claiming their own future. Amidst the turmoil, Ibrahim Traoré stood before them. Not wrapped in armor, not guarded by walls of steel, but clothed in the plain garb of his people. He raised his hand and silence fell like a veil. "Burkina chooses only Burkina," he declared. The words were simple. The words were few. But they struck like thunder, echoing beyond the square, beyond the Sahel, beyond the continent itself. And across Africa, ears turned. From Bamako to Niamey, from N'Djamena to Lagos, whispers spread. If Burkina can stand, why not us? If Traoré can say no, why not our own? For this was larger than one man. It was larger than one land. It was the stirring of a new heartbeat, what some began to call a new world order in Africa. But my brothers and sisters, history does not yield easily. Every step forward invites resistance. Every cry for freedom awakens the chains of the past. Yes, Burkina had raised its flag high above 42 nations. Yes, the people had found their voice. But in the shadows, daggers were still sharpened. In the barracks, plots were still whispered. And in the palaces of distant powers, strategies were still being drawn. The road ahead was not paved with gold. It was paved with fire, with sacrifice, with struggle. And yet it was the only road that led forward. The choice had been made. Burkina would walk its own path. But would that path lead to glory, or to the cross of betrayal? The answer lay in the days to come as history itself prepared to pass its judgment. The night has fallen over Ouagadougou, but the flame has not dimmed. For in the hearts of the people, in the chants of the youth, in the unwavering gaze of their leader, the fire of sovereignty still burns bright. We have witnessed something the world has never seen before. 42 nations gathered not to impose, but to stand beneath the banner of a small land. And in that moment, the truth was revealed. Power does not always flow from the mighty. Sometimes it flows from the courage of the forgotten. Yes, my brothers and sisters, Saudi Arabia leads 42-nation coalition to defend Traoré in Burkina Faso. And the echo of that headline will not fade quickly. It is etched into the chronicles of history, not merely as a military operation, but as a declaration that Africa will no longer bow. And so the question lingers. Will this be remembered as the spark of a new world order in Africa, or will it be buried beneath the betrayals of the old order? The answer does not lie only in the halls of power. It lies in the hands of the people. For Ibrahim Traoré has spoken, "We do not ask for freedom. We protect the freedom we already hold." And his words ring not only in Burkina Faso, but in Mali, in Niger, in Chad, across the rivers and deserts where chains once bound. My brothers and sisters, listen well. The world is trembling. The balance is shifting. And the cry of one small nation has become a trumpet call to many. So I ask you, do you believe this is the dawn of a new era? Do you believe that when Saudi Arabia leads 42-nation coalition to defend Traoré in Burkina Faso, it is not only Burkina that stands, but Africa itself rising? If you believe, let your voice be heard. Leave a comment. Share this message. And above all, subscribe, for this journey is not finished. It is only beginning.